So give me just a minute. I'll get us set up live on YouTube as our additional recording method. And then I'll get started with your questions. Andrea, welcome back. Yay. You're so welcome. Thank you so much for coming. You're getting some feedback right now. There we go. And Kifaya said, I had some problems with the net last time, so I missed many things. Yeah, there will be a little bit of revision from the last webinar. I also will still post a video where I answer all of the questions from the previous webinar in case we don't have time for both. Like, I don't want to repeat everything from last time and then not have time for new questions. So don't worry, all of that will get covered in one video or another. Hey, Selma, welcome. So nice to see you back again. All right. So some of the questions that I've gotten between Friday and now. Okay, one of the new questions was basically getting hired. We had a lot of sort of more practical logistical questions rather than methodology questions between Friday and now. So one of them was about the hiring process in different countries, or the hiring process in terms of teaching in general and also teaching online. Obviously, that's something that will differ from country to country. Hey, Carl, nice to see you. That's something that will differ. And a beer, nice to see you too. That's going to differ from country to country. And it's going to depend a lot on a variety of different factors. So the country itself that you're applying to, your experience, your qualifications, a lot of different things. Yay. Hey, Karen, nice to see you. So yeah, it's really a difficult question to answer, and I'm not going to be able to answer it super specifically just because there are so many variables, right? The question was specifically about being a US citizen and applying for teaching jobs in Mexico. What I can tell you from my limited experience in terms of applying to different jobs in different countries, if you're applying for a job in an EU country, there are specific rules. It's not necessarily just EU, it's any of the EU countries that are part of that Schengen territory. There are various sort of rules that you need to follow and paperwork that you need to do to get hired in those particular countries. And often you'll see job postings that are for EU or Schengen area passport holders only. So if you're a US citizen, that excludes you. And that's just kind of an unfortunate thing, that it's a little bit more difficult to get a job in the EU without an EU passport. That's not to say that it's impossible. It just means that it's a bit more difficult. Some other countries, it's much easier to get hired depending on where you're from. But again, it just depends on how proactive you are, how much research you're willing to do, what kind of company you're going through. If you're applying for a job through a big sort of established company, something like EF, they do a lot of placement work for different countries. So like EF has a huge presence, for example, in Southeast Asia. They do placement in Russia and a couple of other places. So if you're looking for something like that, like you actually want to go physically teach somewhere, EF is a language school that you could look at. International House also does in-person placements in a lot of different countries. Definitely check out International House. I think their website is ihworld.com. Oh, Zane says your voice is low. Is that the case for everybody else? Do I sound kind of quiet? Hi, Jennifer. Yes, I'm answering questions about anything teaching related. So I will definitely get to your question in just a minute. Oh, volume is great. Okay, good. Oh, awesome. Karen's already got a connection. If anyone's looking for a teaching position in South Korea, feel free to reach out to me. She put her email in the chat. That's amazing. Thanks, Karen. This is what I love about this community. Thanks, Camilla. Nice to see you, Camilla. Is that amazing connections are already happening, and resources and opportunities. Stephanie asked, what's EF? Oh, Karen, it looks like maybe you just sent that to host and panelists. Karen, do you mind copy pasting your message and sending it again to everyone so they can see it? Yeah, great reminder. Don't forget to chat to everyone, just because incredible things like this are already happening, and I want everybody to see the information and resources that you're sharing for each other. Yeah, Karen said EF is English first, and it's great. Yes, so it's a company that stands for English First or Education First. Maybe that's it. Thanks, Selma. If you Google EF language school or language centers or something like that, you'll definitely find it. It's a huge established company. They're probably also doing online lessons as well. Um, and the nice thing, the benefit of applying to a company that's very established, like EF, International House, is that you have that kind of structure and opportunities in a lot of different places. And I think Karen is in the process of reposting, I hope. I can do it, Karen, for you if you don't mind. This is the message that she typed. There we go. Great. Okay. The follow-up question to that question in terms of the hiring process in different countries, and that's going to, again, depend largely on the country that you're going to before I get into this follow-up. So common things to be aware of when applying for teaching jobs, whether in person or online with an established company. First of all, it's not uncommon for the company to ask you for a demo lesson, whether that's in person, if you're applying, like if you apply in the United States, you live in the United States, you apply for an in-person teaching job in the United States, commonly they will ask you to come in, or maybe as a follow-up to the interview, they'll ask you to come in and actually teach a demo lesson, maybe to the staff, like to some of the teachers, and they'll sort of make a collective decision on how well you do. When I applied for my very first teaching job in Budapest, Hungary, they asked me to teach a lesson to real students. I actually took over one of the working teachers' classes for an hour to teach a demo lesson. And of course, the director of studies, who was deciding whether to hire me, sat there in the back of the class and watched me and decided how I did. I did get hired, by the way. So yeah, I did my interview and she said the interview went well. Come back tomorrow and teach a demo lesson. It's going to be a reading lesson for upper intermediate students on this course book page. Good luck. So I needed to rely on my training to be able to plan that and do that. For online positions, it's not uncommon for them to ask you for a demo video. So that's where training is really, really important, because if you don't have good training with a good structure, that's tough. You know, where do you start? What do you do? What kind of lesson do you even plan and show them? How do you record it? Do you have students that you can show them that you're teaching? If you've done a training course like Online English Teacher, you already have lessons recorded. You can just pick and choose the best one, or whichever one you like, and send it to them. It's not uncommon in an interview to be asked specific questions about things like classroom management, methodology, or even grammar. I've heard of in interviews, the interviewer asking, okay, present perfect continuous, teach it to me, right? And you need to decide how to do that. I've also heard of interviewers asking specific questions about classroom management, like giving a specific situation. What would you do if a student is doing XYZ? How would you handle it? And you have to rely on either your experience or your training to answer appropriately. Different countries will also ask maybe different things depending on their rules and regulations. I've heard of even certain countries asking about things like tattoos. Obviously, if anything gets like super personal or super uncomfortable, that's a red flag, right? Like, just because what I'm trying to say is there are certain questions that are not common to ask in the United States or in some countries that are not weird to ask in other countries. So you'll want to do your research and see kind of what's common for the particular country or culture that you're looking to work in, but still use your common sense. If things are starting to feel really, really weird, that's probably a bad sign and a sign that you don't want to work for that company. Hopefully that makes sense. So part of the follow-up to that question was whether or not you need a BA, a bachelor's degree, to work in various countries, and whether or not it should be in English or something related to English language or English teaching. Of course, if you're a non-native English speaker, you're going to need some proof that you're trained in English. So you need to somehow prove your level of English, your training in teaching English. So maybe it's better for you to have some sort of degree in English language, plus whatever other requirements you need to fulfill to prove your level of fluency. As a native English speaker, most countries and employers do not require that you have a bachelor's degree in English language or something English teaching related specifically, although that certainly does not hurt, employers, it's at their discretion whether or not they require you to have a bachelor's degree at all. Keep in mind that sometimes in order to get a visa only in a particular country, regardless of what the employer cares about, even just to be eligible to work in some countries, you need to have a bachelor's degree in something. It doesn't have to be English teaching related, but it has to be in something. And without that, you can't even get a visa or a work permit to be in that country, to work legally in that country. So that's why sometimes it's out of the employer's hands. So it is difficult, but it's not impossible to get a job with a company teaching ESL without a bachelor's degree. But what I would recommend strongly is that you do your research, and that could even start with a Google search, like, do I need a bachelor's degree to work in name of country here? Start there and see how that goes, where that takes you. There is a book, and I'm going to try to think of the name. I just thought of it, but of course I can't remember the name of it, that lists a lot of different resources, not so much for teaching methodology, but for teaching requirements and advice in different regions of the world. It even goes so far as to list various language schools and organizations in different places in the world that are great for leads for if you're looking for jobs. I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to send it out in a follow-up email after this. Okay, but that's something to keep in mind. The nice thing about teaching ESL online, what we've started to talk about a lot in these webinars and sessions, is teaching English online as a freelancer, where you're not working for a company, you're self-employed essentially. And then of course, it doesn't matter in terms of what the official requirements are. If you have a bachelor's degree, all that matters is whether or not you're a good teacher and whether or not you know how to market yourself and get students. So that's a huge plus, I would say, of going freelance, is you don't have to worry about those different types of requirements. Plus, you get to keep all the money you make. There's not an employer that's getting all the money and then paying you a fraction of that. So let's see what other good questions that we have. We're going to get to some of those money-making questions in a second. All right. Wow, lots of really, really good questions coming up already. Okay, so let's start with a few of them. If I miss your question, just type it again in the chat. It just means that I didn't see it, or put it in the Q&A session so that I definitely get to it. Okay, first question about reading. I'm wondering about sources for intermediate readers. Do you have any good ideas? Sometimes adapt from newspapers or magazines and get pocket articles online. Yeah, great. So two options really when you're thinking about teaching reading or listening for that matter, in terms of where to get texts. You can have texts that are already in material designed for language learners, like in a course book, for example. Now I have my bookshelf behind me. English File, American English File, or English File is a series that I really like. They're obviously going to have tons of things like articles that are just ready-made. This is the intermediate book, so that's going to be sort of level appropriate for whatever course you're teaching. So you can use course books. In terms of online versions, I heard a rumor. I believe the person who told me the rumor is in this session, so you can clarify if I'm getting this wrong. I believe what I heard is that English File is planning to come out with not just PDF versions of their books, but actually like designed for online classes that are more interactive. I think course books are finally starting to catch up. Course book publishing companies are finally starting to catch up with online teaching. And it's just taken them some time to sort of, get it together and create the resources that we as online teachers need that are electronic. So that's an option for materials. You can also purchase many of these course books in PDF form. So that's an option as well. And then as you can, if you go back and watch, it's not the previous webinars in this session, but if you are an online English teacher, you'll learn exactly how to use electronic like PDF coursebook resources, get them into a PowerPoint and use them to teach reading lessons. So yeah, one option is the sort of ready-made coursebook material. Another option, obviously, as the person who asked this question was alluding to, is what we call authentic material. So authentic material is a fancy way of saying material that was not designed for language learners, just material that's out there in the world for English users, for people who are reading and listening to things in English, not for learning purposes, but just for everyday communication purposes. So yeah, things like magazines, newspapers, online articles, I don't know, BuzzFeed articles, travel articles, blogs are great. You can look for them pretty much anywhere. Huffington Post tends to have just some fun sort of like topical articles. New York Times, although those tend to be long and a little bit challenging in terms of language level. But look around. Sometimes I like to Google by topic. Sometimes I also like to Google things like interesting news articles or funny news articles for things that are going to be relevant and current, but not like super depressing or serious as a lot of the news is. So those are good places. I do find that often I'll need to do a little bit of adapting. So I'll find an article that's great. I like the topic, but it's maybe really long. And so I'll end up just using a couple paragraphs and then adapting a little bit so it sounds like a whole article and not like just a random chunk of an article. So I would say just be prepared to do a little bit of adapting, but those are good suggestions. That's a good, I'm going to make a note for myself. I'll compile a list that I can put out in Online English Teacher for like sources for authentic materials. Okay. For listening, TED Talks are great, especially because you can actually search within the TED Talks different lengths of videos. So you can find like TED Talks that are 5 minutes or less, which is a really nice length for a listening lesson that's, 60 or 90 minutes long. Podcasts are also really helpful. I found one that I actually use for one of my demo lessons in the Online English Teacher course. I think it's called like the 2 minute takeaway. And so it's podcasts that are right about 2 minutes long, which is a very also manageable length for a lesson. Okay, tons of good questions are coming up. I'm getting nervous that I'm going to miss some. Go ahead and stick your question in the Q&A if you just put it in the chat because they're flooding in. Okay, yep, couple of sort of follow-up questions. How to improve listening? Kind of a follow-up to teaching reading. So reading and listening are skills. This is something that we cover in great detail in the Online English Teacher course. There's a whole unit on how to teach a listening lesson. The main key is to follow a listening lesson framework. So that means that students should listen to the same text. Remember, even if it's an audio, we can still call it a text. That doesn't mean it's written only, but that's whatever text the students are listening to. So the TED Talk, for example, or the podcast, or the audio track in the English file material that we're using, whatever it is, they should be able to listen to that same text at least twice with a different clear task set each time. That's really important. If you only let students listen to something once, you're not actually improving their listening. You're just quickly testing their ability to listen spontaneously, which is not super helpful. Obviously, exceptions are things like teaching exam prep, where they only get to listen once. And so you're going to want to teach strategies for that particularly. But that's kind of its own special thing. And it has its own special strategies and its own methodology, teaching exam prep. So that's, I would say, the main thing. And students need to use the task cycle and the kind of listening feedback cycle. So students should have a task, listen for XYZ, or listen to answer these questions. They listen, they check in pairs, you go over the answers. Depending on how they did, they may need to listen again for that same task, or maybe they did great and they can move on and listen to the same audio, but for a different task with more challenging questions. And then you kind of repeat that cycle as many times as you need to in the lesson. Again, in the Online English Teacher course, there's a whole module that goes really in depth on teaching listening. It covers everything from how to insert audio right into your PowerPoint slide. So you have all of the material right there for you, to a lot more detail about that sort of listening feedback cycle that I just mentioned. So very similar question. Nice timing. Patricia and Eliberto, they're like one after another. Have you got any tips to teach English online using songs, videos, linguistic games? Yeah, you can use songs and videos in your listening lessons if you would like to. You can use both of those things for more than just teaching listening. I think the main thing is it always, every lesson and almost every how-to teaching question comes down to one main thing, which is what is your main aim in that lesson? So first step is not just how do I use a song or video, but how do I use a song or video to achieve the aim of what, right? It's your choice, but that's the first step. So if you're using a song, what are you using it for? Are you using it as a listening comprehension exercise and your main aim is to improve students listening? Okay, or a video? Or are you using it as a text-based systems lesson? So are you using it as a way to introduce specific grammar or vocabulary or functional language? So that's going to determine how you approach using that song or using that video. Either one is, as I said, totally fine. There's not one that's right and one that's wrong. You just have to make that decision initially, and then everything else goes from there. So if you're using a song or video to teach listening comprehension, then it's going to be just like using any other audio text to teach listening comprehension. So all the stuff I just said, setting clear tasks, the students should be able to listen at least a couple of different times and have a clear task set up front that they're listening for, get feedback on that task, all of that good stuff. You'll structure it like a listening lesson, just using that song or that video as your audio. If you're using it to teach grammar or vocabulary, that's also great. Then you're going to structure it just like you would a text-based grammar or vocab lesson using that song or that video as the text. And that's, again, something when we look at teaching grammar and teaching vocabulary in Online English Teacher, you'll get exactly the whole structure, exactly the lesson framework you need for a text-based lesson. So how to first present the audio in a way that students are able to get kind of general comprehension, and then how to go inside the audio, the song or the video, and pull out the grammar or the vocab that you're trying to teach. Because then after that, you need to still go into meaning, form, pronunciation, just like you would with any other audio or video, with any other audio in a grammar lesson. I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry. What I'm trying to say is after you present the song or the video, if you're using it to teach grammar or vocab, you then still need to clarify meaning, form, and pronunciation, just like you would in any other grammar or vocab lesson. There we go. Sometimes my brain moves faster than my mouth in these live sessions. Thanks for bearing with me. And then you need to provide practice of the new grammar or vocab, just like you would in any other grammar or vocab lesson, right? So that's the main thing. There also, I'm going to add a video in Online English Teacher specifically about using videos in other ways. So there's some really fun ideas for using videos that we touched on briefly in the previous webinar. Things like using a video for speaking activities. For example, you play the video for half of the students, but on mute, and those students have to describe what's happening in the video to their partner, right, who can't even see the video. Or maybe you play the video on mute for everybody, and then in pairs, the students have to recreate the dialogue that's happening in the video. So they're really fun things you can do that way also. Okay, Ava says solutions from OUP, Oxford University Press, have interactive materials as well. Awesome. Jacqueline said the news is a great source for authentic listening and reading materials. Great. Carl said, okay, this is a good warning. The PDF versions of English file are going to be archived. They're going to go the way of the dodo bird. So go ahead and go get those now if you want them. Podcast transcripts, yep. Jennifer says, I didn't even think of blogs. One thing that reminds me, Andrea, thank you. For listening lessons, a big don't is playing the audio and showing the students the transcript the first couple of times they listen. That means it's no longer a listening lesson. Oops, now it's a reading lesson. There's nothing wrong with a reading lesson, but if your aim is to practice listening comprehension, you're not doing that anymore. So transcripts are great, but use them as reading material in a reading lesson if that's the way you want to go. or use it only as like a, in case of emergency, you've played the audio many different times with good, clear tasks, you've set it up correctly, and then the students then still don't understand. Okay, now we can bring in the transcript. And in that module in Online English Teacher about teaching listening, we go into exactly how to do that, how to use the transcript correctly and not the incorrect way that a lot of teachers do. Awesome. Opinion pieces in newspapers are good. Yes. Yeah, I agree, Jennifer. The news is sometimes rough these days. That's why I will specifically Google things like funny animal news stories or whatever, and not just the news in general, because I can't even watch it myself. It's too depressing. Ooh, good follow-up question. So what do you do if the authentic material, like you're using a news article, let's say, has too many blocking words? Yes, good. This is a really common question about using authentic materials with students, because by definition, authentic material is not meant for language learners, right? Like by definition, it's too hard for them because it's designed for proficient speakers. It's not for learners. So a couple of ways to deal with that. The biggest thing to remember, this can be your mantra when working with authentic materials, is grade the task, not the text. What I mean by that, let me interpret. So by grade, I'm talking about grading the level of difficulty, like the gradation, not grade as in you get an A and you get a B. So I mean grade as in control the level of difficulty. If it's authentic material, obviously you can't control the level of difficulty because it's already there in the article. It's been done for you. In a language course book, it's graded, right? The articles in this book are already graded for intermediate level students. So that's a pro of using this ready-made material and a con of using authentic material. However, in real life, the students aren't going to be reading a course book for fun. They're going to be reading blogs for fun or listening to podcasts or whatever it is they want to do in their normal life with English. That's what we're trying to train them to do. So the pro of using authentic materials is we're going to train students on how to deal with material that's sort of inherently already above their level. So if you feel like the article has blocking words, which by definition it's going to because it's authentic, instead of grading the text, making it less difficult because we can't do that, we can grade the tasks. We can grade the level of difficulty of the material, of the questions that we ask, right? Of the activities that we give students surrounding that text. You can have a text that has a lot of blocking words, but if the comprehension questions that you design, remember, you're in control of this lesson, you're in control of the material, the activities that you're giving the students based around this text, and you're always going to give them an activity, right? It's a big no-no to give the student something to read or listen to without any comprehension questions. Never, ever give the student something and just say, here, read this, or here, listen to this. That's a big don't, because first of all, the students are going to think, why? What am I looking for? Why am I reading this? Why am I listening to this? And second, you're not giving them any structure. It's super overwhelming for the students to have a whole article to read. And they think if you don't tell them what to read for, the assumption is they're supposed to read for everything. They're supposed to understand everything, which is impossible. So give them a task, give them a clear task, and you're in control of that task. You decide how hard or how easy that task is. So if you make the task less challenging for lower level students, even if they don't understand all of the other stuff in the article, you're motivating them. Look, right? Even if you didn't understand every single word, every single thing, you still understood enough to get all these questions correct. That's motivating. That's where the magic starts to happen. And what I've learned, there's a, we talk about this in Online English Teacher as well. What I've found is that if you don't sort of directly draw attention to the unknown words in a text, right? If you don't say things like, okay, everybody, were there any words you didn't understand? Don't do that. Then the students won't actually ask about them. As long as you've set clear tasks up front, you haven't invited additional questions about unknown words, the unknown words won't actually cause as much trouble as you think they would, for sure. Karen, amazing. Karen, thank you so much. I have a ton of links for ESL materials. Feel free to reach out. She left her email again. Awesome. Good, good. Patricia said, this is a good training. Great, thanks. I'm glad. Ooh, Joyce, let me come back to that question. That's a good one. Kifaya says, while I was teaching my students, I remembered your words not to ask students if they understand and not to put a question and to put a question instead to find out their understanding. It was great to try it because it was more beneficial. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad. Okay, great follow-up question, Carl. What if the student asks about unknown words in the authentic text? Okay, so that's different. If you have not invited the question, but even still, you've set a clear task up front, the students have read just to answer those questions or listen just for those questions, and then still afterwards, they ask about words in the authentic text. So in that case, what you can do is in preparation for your lesson, you'll want to go through and think about, okay, are there any other words where if the students don't understand, they're not going to be able to do the questions? And if that's the case, you might want to do a vocabulary pre-teach. I'll teach you exactly how to do that inside Online English Teacher. There's a whole thing about that. But if it's still like just words that you haven't brought up, they didn't need them to answer the questions, they're still asking about them, that's where your training really comes in handy. What you need is to have a quick definition. So maybe you'll want to go through and just have very quick definitions prepared, not to bring up if the students don't ask, but kind of just in case, very clear definitions ready for some of those words that you suspect they won't know. And then have a good CCQ or two concept checking question prepared for any additional unknown words you think the students won't know. Again, this is a just in case thing. So if they don't ask about them, don't bring it up. That's going to derail your timing and turn it into a vocab lesson and increase your teacher talk. So don't bring them up. But if the student specifically asks, excuse me, teacher, what does blah, blah, blah word mean? Then hopefully you'll have a clear definition and CCQs ready. If it gets to be too much, again, think about your main aim. And even though you're not necessarily explicitly telling your students, talking to your students about methodology and your main aim, you can still keep that in mind and kind of gently direct students back to the fact that they don't need to know the meaning of every single word in the text to understand the text. It's actually not always beneficial to approach reading that way. As a native speaker in your own language, you probably don't approach reading that way, right? Unless you're studying for an exam or something like that and you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to know all these words. But honestly, think about how you read in your native language, whatever that first language is that you have. Probably you gloss over a few words every now and then that you don't really know or that you couldn't explicitly define. You probably don't quickly grab your dictionary or your phone and look them up, right? You can kind of just figure it out from context, or you know that it's not worth it because you understood what you wanted to get out of the article, even without that word. So that's what I would say is kind of direct students back to that. And you can also, if this is something that's happening a lot, especially if this is a one-on-one student, you have the luxury of time and of kind of personalizing things for that student, where you can teach the student strategies for finding the meaning of an unknown word. So, actually do some training with the student on things like, okay, if you come across a word you don't know when you're reading, what can you do? Yeah, you can look it up on your phone, but what else can you do? Can you find some clues in the text about the meaning of this word? Can you first figure out what part of speech it is, right? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? What is it describing if it's an adjective? Do you recognize any parts of the word? So why not plan a whole lesson on strategies for finding the meaning of unknown words? I've done that for my students before, and they have loved it because it makes them more independent. Really good question. And is it better to CCQ or ask students to elicit examples when teaching grammar? Okay, moving to grammar teaching. This is covered in if you missed it, Miriam, this is covered in the webinar that I just did in this series on how to teach grammar online. So definitely go back and watch that recording. It's still available. If you haven't already, I'll put the link in the chat. And I think it's not going to be clickable unless I actually copy and paste the link. So let me do that for you. So it's going to be teflhorizons.com/webinar-replay. So I'm going to stick that in the chat now. You're going to get an email with this information anyway. So if for some reason you forget to save it, don't panic. but it's here. So you'll find a lot more detail about using CCQs to teach grammar there. But the short answer is when teaching grammar, what you want is contextualized examples. There were too many X's in that phrase, contextualized examples. And then from there, you're going to ask contextualized CCQs about those examples. That's the short answer. Okay, let's get to some more questions. Okay, I was wondering if you could give some tips for drilling when having more than 15 students. At work, they recommend telling students to drill with microphones off, but is there any other way? Yeah, that's one way, is having, students can still drill, right? Repeat what you said back, even with their mic off, just to hear themselves and sort of see if it matches what you just modeled. Obviously, you need to model with your microphone on. If anybody is super lost as to what we're talking about, modeling and drilling is how you are helping students with pronunciation. So modeling is I say it, drilling is you repeat, right? So listen, everybody, teacher, repeat. Listen, teacher, repeat. That's modeling and drilling for the pronunciation part of teaching vocabulary or teaching grammar or functional language. So yeah, I know when you have a lot of students, and particularly online, it can get a bit messy. My tip, you can do this in person or online, is to use a strategy called CIC drilling. That's the easy way to remember it, which stands for chorus, individual, chorus. So what that means is even with mics on, you can do this. Tell everybody, okay, listen, unmute, repeat. It might get messy. You might have to pause a little bit longer than you would in person because you're going to have people with slower connections and, it's going to be kind of like trickling in. But it still lets the students say it out loud, right? Put it out there in the meeting, and you will be able to hear at least a little bit of how the students are doing. Of course, you're not going to be able to hear every single student. That's where the I comes in, the individual drilling. You can then say, okay, everybody mute unless I say your name. When I say your name, repeat, right? And you can actually still do some individual drilling online, get the students to say it out loud. If you have a student who's super shy and just flat out refuses, you're going to just have to let that go. You cannot force a student to drill individually if they're just not comfortable, but you can try, right? So try to invite individual students. And it's not, here's the thing. If you have 15 students, do not ask each of your 15 students to repeat it back individually, because you're going to be teaching pronunciation for the entire lesson. And that's not good because you're going to miss out on time for practice. Just choose a couple of students, maybe 3, right? For that particular word. Maybe the students that you didn't hear repeating it in the group, or maybe a student that you heard repeating it incorrectly. So you have an opportunity to do some error correction. So in that individual drilling, you can do a bit of error correction. And then you're going to end on the final C, the chorus, so that everybody once again has a chance to benefit from those corrections and say it once more, at least once more, maybe 2 or 3 times. And then the next word, choose 2 or 3 different students for the individual part. So they still all get a chance, just not every single word. That's a good question. Okay, more good questions are coming up. How to improve writing. Yes. Oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. If you were in the webinar series last time in April, you know how passionate I get about writing tasks. How to improve writing. There's a framework for teaching writing lessons, just like there's a framework for teaching a listening lesson or a grammar lesson. So that's the first thing, is use the writing lesson framework that is covered in depth in the How to Teach Writing module in Online English Teacher. But it basically involves having a lead-in, having a model text that the students can use as a demonstration. And the most important, my biggest pet peeve for improving writing is giving the students authentic tasks. Please don't ask your students to write an essay or write a paragraph, because I don't know what the heck that means, and neither do your students. When is the last time in your real life that you sat down and you said, I think I'm going to write an essay about this topic? That never happens unless it's an academic setting. If you're preparing for the TOEFL exam, sure, you're writing essays. If you're an elementary school student or a middle school student or a high school student, you probably have to write essays. That's different. If you have a student preparing for some sort of academic setting, okay. But otherwise, if we are teaching adult students who want to improve their writing skills, having them write essays does nothing, really. So make sure whatever you're getting the students to write, it's something real. Write a Yelp review, write an email, write a blog post, write an Instagram caption, write a Facebook post, write an Airbnb review, write an Airbnb listing. Whatever it is, that's the first place to start. It should be something real. And then the rest of your writing lesson falls into place around that. Now you know what kind of model to give the students. Now you could think about some functional language that would help them write that particular thing. Now it's motivating and fun because I want to really recommend this restaurant in my city, or I want to tell people not to go to this terrible restaurant that I just went to in my Yelp review. That's so much more fun than a paragraph. So those are my biggest tips. Question: when you are a teacher in a formal organization, like a language school, I would imagine, how are you evaluated by your superior? That's a great question. That's going to vary hugely depending on where you're working and who you're working for. The example I can give you is how I was evaluated when I first started teaching. When I was working in Budapest, I was working for a language school. It's not an internationally known school, but it was the biggest language school in Hungary, called Katedra. And their system was basically for newer teachers or for not senior level teachers. They would have maybe 3 or 4 times a year, a senior level teacher or the director of studies come, and it was meant to be like a surprise evaluation, so that you couldn't like extra prepare in a way that you wouldn't normally. Sometimes they would give you a heads up, but they would come and sit in on a class, and things they were looking for were very much the same types of things that you will get in any reputable training course. So like things that you would learn in a CELTA or in Online English Teacher. Things like, do you start the lesson effectively with a lead-in? Do you engage the students? Do you, big one, do you include enough communication and student talk time in your lesson? Are you effectively minimizing teacher talk time? Are you using a framework? Are you providing enough practice? If it's a language lesson like grammar or vocab or functional language, are you doing enough of a clarification, but not so much that it becomes overly teacher talk filled or unclear? So in terms of the individual evaluations, they were looking at exactly the same things that I'm looking for when I evaluate you in Online English Teacher in the live practicum, or that a CELTA trainer would look for, that I look for as a CELTA trainer when I evaluate lessons on a CELTA course. So those same types of things, which is why training is so important. Because if they show up and you have a lesson where you're just kind of chatting or where you're clearly not prepared, which I unfortunately saw when I was a senior teacher and started to do evaluations of my colleagues, that's not going to go well. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get fired, but it means that you're going to need some further training, and you're going to get very constructive feedback. It might mean that you're going to get fired depending on your situation. Language schools will often look at other things though as well. In addition to evaluations of individual lessons, they'll also look at kind of your overall performance as a teacher. And that it's not necessarily going to include these things, but it could include things like, how flexible are you? If you've been asked to pick up extra lessons or sub for other teachers, were you available? Did you say yes? Professionalism. Do you show up on time? Do you continually hold the lessons over time, which you shouldn't be doing? You know, if it's a physical school, are you taking up classroom time when you were supposed to end your lesson 20 minutes ago, right? How helpful are you to your colleagues? How much planning do you do? Do you have lesson plans done on paper that you can share with other teachers? If another teacher has to substitute for you, do you have a nice lesson plan ready for them, or do they have to kind of wing it, right? Things like that. How many hours do you teach? How many hours are you willing to teach? So stuff like that is often another way that you're evaluated. And it depends completely on the organization, whether you're evaluated, once a month or once a year, whether the evaluations are set up front, like, okay, on this day for this class, you're going to have an evaluation, or whether it's kind of like a pop-in random evaluation. All right, what else do we have? Oh, great. Selma just had an amazing recommendation, a website that will help you know the readability of the material you're using. So it'll give it a score that tells you kind of the difficulty level of the text. Awesome. That's a great resource. Oh, this question. Kafaya asked, are you reading text aloud or silently? Silently. I cannot say this enough. Any well-trained teacher knows, say it in the chat if you know it, never, ever, ever have your students read a text out loud in class. This is a big one. I know what you're thinking if this is new for you. A lot of teachers say, it's probably coming up in the chat already as I speak, a lot of teachers say, wait, but what's wrong with having the students read together in class out loud, whether it's online or in person? What's wrong with it? Well, think about this as, imagine you're a student. I'm a student, I'm in a class where the teacher is having us take turns reading parts of the text out loud. If I'm reading in that moment, if it's my turn, what is my experience? What am I experiencing? I might be so focused on pronunciation that I'm not even paying attention to the comprehension, right? Number one. If I'm a student that hasn't read yet and my turn is coming up, what am I doing? I'm probably desperately trying to read ahead to see if there's any words that I don't know. If I have already read, if my turn is done, what am I doing? I'm maybe zoned out. Maybe I'm still beating myself up over that one word that I butchered the pronunciation of in my paragraph, right? So not helpful. If I'm any other student, what am I doing? Maybe I'm a little bit of a lower level than my peers, and so I'm struggling to keep up. Maybe I'm more advanced than some of my peers, so I'm annoyed that this person is reading too slowly or their pronunciation is bad. So I would argue that in that scenario, nobody is engaged and nobody is actually practicing the comprehension that they need. Also, this is a huge rule of teaching English in general. What is the reason we're teaching English in the first place? To help our students use English in real life. The whole reason they're learning is so they can leave the class and it's going to help them in their real life situation, whatever that is. So in real life, as an adult, we are never in a situation where we're taking turns reading a text out loud with other people. It just doesn't happen. The way that we read as adults, something that we actually want to comprehend, we read silently. That's how we need to train our students. And by structuring a reading lesson appropriately in the correct way, you will motivate your students to want to read silently and you won't need to force them to read aloud. Yes, Lorenzo, that message, that response is brilliant and it came only to hosts and panelists. Can you repeat it to everyone? Because I love your answer. Love, love, love your answer. So Andrea just asked as a follow-up question, I understand never have students read aloud, but is there ever a scenario, I like that you made that all caps, is there ever a scenario where the teacher can read a text aloud to the students? I think no. And I think Lorenzo gave the perfect reason. You should ask yourself, what is the purpose of me reading a text out loud to my students? What is the purpose? As an adult, we are not read aloud to very often. Audiobooks are a big thing now, and I'm into them also. But that's a recording. That's not a real person sitting there reading out loud to me. Right? So if you're thinking about your students needing to comprehend, say, an audiobook, that's not a reading lesson anymore, is it? That's a listening lesson. Then just teach a listening lesson. And maybe your text is a page of an audiobook that's read aloud that somehow stands alone, that's fine. But in that case, you're planning and teaching a listening lesson, and that is your audio text. It's not a reading lesson at all if what you're doing is reading out loud to the students. If the answer to Lorenzo's perfect question is that you want the students to hear correct pronunciation, that's also not a reading lesson anymore, is it? That's pronunciation. And if you want to teach your students pronunciation, then perhaps you do some pronunciation activities. Yeah, so I see where you're going with this, Andrea. My question was not limited to reading. Totally fair. So maybe your purpose is that you want the students to hear pronunciation. In that case, there are many, many ways to practice pronunciation that doesn't involve having to read an entire text out loud. So maybe you read just a chunk of the text and then students practice, saying that aloud to each other or something. Yeah, like maybe you're doing work with intonation and connected speech, as Lorenzo just said. Then you're gonna do that, probably not by reading an entire text, but just a short couple of sentences, modeling and drilling, all of that. Okay, great question. Hopefully that was helpful. Yes, you're welcome. So again, I think it always, honestly, why I love Lorenzo's answer so much is because that's a great question to ask yourself anytime you do anything in the classroom, is what is the purpose? How did you say it? What is the purpose of me doing this for my students? Like, what are my students getting out of me doing this? And if you can't answer that well, or the answer is going to be enlightening, right? Because it might tell you that activity isn't worth doing in general, or it might tell you that activity is worth doing, but it only belongs in a certain type of lesson. Lorenzo said anything in life. I agree. Yeah, that's awesome. Sarah asked, okay, so somebody just said one purpose could be to demo prosody, like rhythm, intonation, etc. Sarah had a follow-up to that. How about teaching alliteration and rhythm? Yes, totally. But again, then the way that you read and the thing that you read should reflect that. So I'm not just going to pick up any text and say, okay, I'm going to read this out loud to you and assume that the students are getting that out of it. It has to be a whole lesson designed for that. Maybe it's a lesson about giving a presentation or giving a speech. That would make sense. And then part of me reading a speech out loud is as a model for what I want my students to then practice later. So then that would be me reading a speech out loud as a model. From there, we're going to do some clarification about the intonation, about this connected speech, about the sounds, about when and how I pause and what that means. And then the follow-up is going to be the students practicing that themselves. So that's a whole lesson. If it's just normal rhythm and pronunciation in spoken English, well, when I read out loud, my intonation and rhythm is not the same as when I'm having a conversation with somebody. So you got to think about that. All right. Andre said, makes so much sense. Awesome. Yeah, good point. So I'm not saying it's wrong to focus on those things. I'm just saying that, okay, that's a whole lesson in and of itself, and it still has to have a specific real life purpose. Okay, amazing collaboration and questions and answers happening. Okay, question. If you teach a student 3 times a week, do you focus on a theme, type of lesson, or it doesn't matter? Great question. And I think the answer is variety. So you're going to want to probably have a whole course plan or a whole syllabus ready for the whole class. Like if you are teaching a student indefinitely, then maybe you just make a course plan month by month, or like for 1 4-month period at a time, or whatever you want to do. If you have students signing on for set packages of lessons, like a student signs on for 6 weeks and that's the length, or they can sign on for 3 months or whatever it is, then you'll make a course plan for that particular student or that particular class. And you're going to want to make sure there's a variety. So maybe one day out of the 3 times a week, you do a receptive skills kind of lesson, like a reading or listening kind of thing. Maybe one of those is a systems lesson, like a grammar or vocab, and maybe one of those is a productive lesson, like a speaking or writing lesson. And they can all kind of go together. Maybe they're connected by a certain theme, right? Like maybe in the first lesson of the week, it's a receptive skills and it's reading. And then the vocabulary, the next class comes kind of from that reading, or it's around a similar theme. And then maybe the writing lesson is they write something similar to what they read, like they read a blog post, and then the writing lesson is they write a blog post. So you can definitely link them to give a kind of a sense of cohesion. You don't have to, but you could. It's a nice way to kind of tie things together. And I think just make sure there's a variety. Oh, Karen, so nice to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by and for giving us some really useful insight. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Any ideas on the use of Commonplace book? I am not familiar with the Commonplace book, Sarah, so unfortunately, no. Apologies. Anybody else familiar with the book Commonplace that they could suggest ideas? I'll look into it. Maybe I'll do some follow-up on that. Okay, more questions. What type of system or systems do you use to track which students or classes have done which lessons so you don't duplicate lessons? Yeah, great question. That's where having a syllabus really comes in handy. I found that when I was teaching lots of different private students as a freelancer, I was doing that in person in Budapest for quite a while. I had built up quite a nice little network and I had tons of different private students all doing different things. I put together I still was doing everything on physical paper, but I actually had like a physical notebook where I had records for each student. So I would keep everything there. I had their course plan. Then I could take notes on, okay, I taught this lesson on this day, check, but also here's what we got to. Here's maybe something we didn't get to that I need to save for another time. And I also would jot down some reflections. Here are a few key questions the student asked me that I need to follow up on. Or here's something that the student found particularly challenging and I need to review. Like I would take notes on what I needed to review with the student as well. So I think detailed note taking and keeping about each student or each class is really helpful. And there should first be a course plan or syllabus and then notes that are taken on each individual lesson that's happening within that course plan or syllabus. So yeah, you can keep a notebook, you can keep a planner or like a date book or diary. You could also probably set that up on a spreadsheet. There are also some specific things like OneNote is a way that you can sort of have notebooks that you share with individual students. I don't have a ton of experience on that, but there's actually a teacher in Online English Teacher Now who that's what she uses to do exactly what you're asking, sort of like organize and keep track of all her different students and classes. And she actually offered to do a OneNote tutorial for the online English teachers in the community. So I'm sure she'd be willing to do that for the community again for incoming teachers. It was really interesting. I went, I attended her tutorial and I learned a lot. This is a long question, so give me just a second to read it so I know how to summarize it and answer it. Okay, yeah, I see. So somebody said, as a CELTA graduate, I know exactly how to plan lessons using authentic materials in a course book, but can you please talk about how I create a whole curriculum? So I know the type of lessons I need to plan, like skills and systems combination, but how do I successfully put them all together? Like how many reading lessons do I need? Okay. Deciding how many lessons I need to plan for each system or skill. So yes, so this is a tough question to answer because it's going to depend on the specific situation. So the first thing that you need to know is what's the context of the class? And that's going to involve things like, okay, is this a one-on-one class? If so, we're approaching this from the perspective of you are a freelance teacher, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You are a freelance teacher and you are booking students or booking classes. So maybe a student approaches you and says, I want to take a course with you. So you're designing a course for this student. Okay. So if it's a one-on-one student, you need to know first, how many lessons are they signing up for? And that's your choice, right? You can sell packages of lessons the way you want to. So the length of the course matters. Is it a 1 month course and you meet 4 times a week? Is it a 1 month course you meet once a week? Is it a 6-week course and you meet twice a week? Like define those parameters. And then from there, you need to have a balance of skills and systems. Or maybe you need to do a more in-depth needs analysis with your student to see what they want. Do they want primarily speaking? In that case, maybe you're just teaching speaking lessons, but you're including a bit of grammar and functional language every now and then as needed. Speaking lessons already should include functional language. Those of you an online English teacher know that designing a speaking lesson includes some useful language or functional language to put into that speaking task, whatever the speaking task is that you're doing with the student. So that's the main thing I would say. From there, I like to use a course book kind of as a model. So like I can open the table of contents in this American English file book, and I can sort of see, okay, here are some topics and here's how the grammar kind of progresses. So if I know that my student is intermediate and they want, I don't know, 20 lessons, then maybe I'm going to look at a particular chunk of intermediate and say, okay, in about a 4-week time period or 6-week time or whatever maybe I can cover 2 units of this book, and I can use this book as sort of my teaching material for the class. Does that make sense? So I'll look at what 2 units of this cover, which grammar points, what kind of listening exercises are there, what kind of reading exercises are there, and I can use some of that. Obviously, I'm going to source that material when I teach. And then I can also supplement with authentic materials, with authentic speaking, writing, listening, whatever I need. Hopefully that helps. So that's it's going to depend on what exactly your student wants. And it's going to be the same thing if you're teaching business English or exam prep. How much time do they have? Do an in-depth needs analysis. What exactly do they need? Because you're going to want to tailor it to the student or students, and then plan a variety from there. This is something that I've done before. Feel free to email me at info@teflhorizons.com. Because teachers have actually hired me before to either create a curriculum for them based on their students' needs, or to sort of train them, to work with them one-on-one if they want a bit more input in that project. So it is something that you can hire me to do if that's something that you want, if you want individual training on that. If you're not looking for quite that level of probably cost and quite that level of like one-on-one-ness, remember that I am including this in the soon to be made over model of Online English Teacher. So at the moment I touch on that in Online English Teacher, but I've had so many people ask me exactly this question. Like I get the lesson planning thing. You've covered that very well. What I don't get now still is I want to design a course, right? How do I do that? I've had enough of those questions that I am, by September 6th, when the new practicum of Online English Teacher starts, there will be a whole module in Online English Teacher, module 9, that's going to address that. So how to design a whole curriculum and how to approach teaching different types of classes, like one-on-one or business English or exam prep. So if that's really something you're looking for, that's my best recommendation, is to sign on to Online English Teacher. If you're already in Online English Teacher, you don't have to do anything. You'll just get that made over module in September. It'll be ready. I'll give you a heads up when it's ready. Okay, what are the benefits of TKT certifications? Would they benefit you if you would like to teach other subject areas? So I'm going to be honest, I'm not intimately familiar with TKT. I'm only mildly familiar with TKT. So I'm probably not the best person to answer. If anyone has taken the TKT, feel free to chime in and talk about your experience with it. I'd be happy to have you supplement my answer. What I do know, TKT tends to be, I believe, for non-native speakers, as kind of a test of their ability, English ability, and also English teaching ability, as far as I understand. So I know TKT has been really helpful for sort of pre-CELTA teachers, if you kind of want to get that done first and say like, okay, I have the level that I need to be able to teach English, and sort of an initial knowledge of teaching English, of things like methodology, of things like terminology. And then I think it's going to give you a lot of that kind of overview of methodology and terminology to help prep you for bigger teaching courses. So certainly there's no harm in doing it if you're sort of on the fence of like, am I ready to teach? Like, is my level okay to be an English teacher? Let's do this certification first to have something super official. Like it's definitely going to help you get accepted into a CELTA or other program if you're kind of on the fence. But otherwise, like if you already have a CELTA or you already want to do Online English Teacher or something like that, I don't think you need it. Let me see if anybody chimed in before I move on. Andrea, you just cracked me up. This is very, very helpful. Pen of fire over here. And I swear I'm recording this time so you can review. Yeah, Jennifer says that will be great. Sometimes it feels like we're a little directionless when it comes to planning a whole course. Joyce asked as a follow-up, how do you approach needs assessment, which I've just been talking about, of a student? Is this something you can share? I'm going to give you needs analysis templates. I know you're in Online English Teacher, Joyce, so you can look forward to this. In that module that I just talked about, module 9, I'm going to give you actual templates of it. Like, here's a needs analysis that you can give your student. because I know that you're not the only person with that question. Yeah, Jacqueline just said, Joyce, great question. Selma just said, Joyce asked a very good question. Okay, so this is a popular question. So yeah, needs analysis. Let me just show you. We looked at this before, but for those of you who missed it, and for those of you who were planning to watch the recording and couldn't, let me kind of show you what the makeover is going to look like the online English teacher is getting. So online English teacher already includes in-depth methodology training on all of the different modules. So all the different lesson types, stuff that you've already asked about, like how to teach listening, how to teach reading, how to teach writing. So all that good stuff that we've talked about is already there. You're going to learn exactly how to teach a writing lesson, exactly how to teach a listening lesson, all of that. What it doesn't have so much of right at this moment is this stuff. The final module right now, module 9, which is called your online teaching career, touches on some of these things. It doesn't go super in depth. And this is something I was afraid, I don't know why now, I was hesitant initially to include too much kind of not teaching specific stuff. I just didn't think, I was afraid that was going to be outside the scope of what you wanted when you enrolled an online English teacher. And what I found was that I was wrong, and you wanted the methodology, but what you also want and need are how to basically, now that you know how to teach, how do you work as a teacher? How do you achieve success as a working freelance teacher, right? And it was a bit silly of me, I now realize, to not include these things. So the makeover that online English teacher is getting, module 9 will now be just what you see here. So instead of trying to lump all that together, it's going to go way more in depth on things like acquiring and using materials, which we've been talking about, authentic materials, course materials. A few questions have come up about, okay, I get how to plan lessons now, but it's taking me a super long time. And that's no fun, right? I don't want to spend 6 hours planning a lesson. I want to spend 30 minutes planning a lesson. Fair. So there's going to be some really, really helpful tricks and resources that I share to how to take everything you've just learned in the previous 8 modules about planning different types of lessons and do it faster, right? So saving time. Then these 2 big ones that you've just been asking me about. First of all, how do you design a whole course or plan a whole syllabus? If you have a student who comes in and says, I want to learn with you for 6 weeks, here's what I want. Okay, great. How do you plan that course? Or how do you plan and market a whole group course, right? And then finally, how do you do a needs analysis? So I'm going to include some actual templates that you can just give your students to analyze exactly what they need and then plan your syllabus from there. So that's just module 9. Module 10, it's actually a question that somebody asked me in an email to answer in this session, so we can get to that now, is basically, how do you make money? That's a great question, right? I know that none of us are getting into teaching because we want to be rich. We're doing it because we love teaching and we love helping our students. But we want to make a living. So the person who wrote the email specifically said, I have a feeling that online English teaching is a great fit for me, but I also need to pay my bills, right? And so I want to figure out if I can make that work. That's a really fair question. So module 10 is going to be all about that. Basically a little bit on ongoing professional development. How do you sort of continue to improve as a teacher so that you can always feel like you're moving up and not just in a lateral way? But then a ton about how do you market yourself as a freelance teacher? Like, how do you find students? How do you find the right students? What do you charge your students? How do you justify charging what you actually want to charge? And then some templates and materials for the logistical side of things. So like a contract that you can give your students that they sign when they sign on, sort of the parameters. Here's a personal example. One of the mistakes that I made when I first started teaching, this was before I was even teaching online, but in person, I was starting to book a ton of teachers on my own as a freelance teacher. I've noticed that this happens once you get a couple of students, things will start to move more quickly. It's a little bit of a slow start, and then it picks up speed, because if you do a good job, if your students are happy, what do? They recommend you to other students. They recommend you to all their friends. And you start getting more and more inquiries with less marketing work. about teaching. So this was happening. I was super excited. It was great. And pretty soon I was booking up my schedule with just freelance one-on-one students, which was great. I was making money, but the problem is I would have a fully booked day, right, in terms of when I wanted to teach, or a fully booked week, and I would get cancellations because somebody had a last minute appointment that they forgot about, or something came up, or they were just so tired that day, or they weren't feeling that well, or they forgot that they had to pick up their kid from school, or whatever it was. Adults have lives. And so I was very understanding of that. What they didn't realize was that this was almost my sole income. I was almost working completely freelance and not for a language school anymore. And so if I had 5 lessons booked in a day, and then I only ended up teaching 2 or 3 of them, and that was happening a couple of days in the week, it was drastically affecting my income. And I needed to be able to count on my income because I had things like rent and bills to pay, right? So what I learned was that I needed a contract and I needed a policy. And so I ended up making up a contract, sending out a notification to all my students, hey, this is my new policy. Thanks for understanding. If you cancel a lesson with less than 24 hours notice, you still get charged, or you still have to pay half price, or whatever I decided. So that's what I'll help you do as well, is put some policies and systems in place. I'll give you templates for an actual contract that you can give your students when they sign on with you, so that it's nothing personal, right? That's your policy. You're a business. This is your business. So that if things do come up, and again, it's not like my students were intentionally trying to do this to me. They didn't think about it. Like, they're busy adults. If you cancel a lesson, it's no big deal for you. They're just not realizing sort of what happens on the other end. When I did that, the number of cancellations I got almost disappeared. I had almost none, because they thought about, or they canceled with days notice in advance. And I was able to then pick up students to fill that spot for that week, like an intro lesson or whatever it was. So I'll give you all of that stuff that you need, not only for needs analysis and course design, but also the logistical side. So this is not what it looks like in Online English Teacher right now, just to be clear. This is the makeover that the final module of Online English Teacher is getting. It's going to be divided into these 2 modules, and this is the stuff that will be included in those 2 modules. So this is going to be ready. The deadline for me that I've put on myself to create this is September 6th, which is when the live teaching practicum starts. So to be clear, if you are already enrolled in Online English Teacher, you don't see this now, you see the current version, but you will see this. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to buy anything else. It's just automatically going to appear on the course platform starting September, 2nd week of September. And I'll send out an email to remind you when it's ready. If you are joining Online English Teacher, join now, because you can get the discount now. Let me show you that just so you have a visual. For those of you who don't know, I'm offering a special on enrollment for Online English Teacher at the moment. So currently, you can save $150 on enrollment. So definitely enroll now. Don't wait until September 6th, because this special will not be happening anymore. So you'll have to pay full price for the same thing. So enroll now, start working through the other modules now, and then definitely depending on how fast you work through Online English Teacher, I don't think you're going to get to modules 9 and 10 until they're ready in September, maybe. But just know that you can start working through everything that's already there now. And then you'll just also automatically get the new improved modules 9 and 10 in September, since you're already a member. And you have lifetime access. So it's not going to go away. You're not going to get kicked out of the platform or something before all of that new stuff shows up. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let me check the chat to make sure I'm not missing follow-up questions here. Okay, good. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back up. Joyce says, yay, templates. Glad to hear. Jennifer Phillips, yes, we want this. Yeah, those 2 people are both in Online English Teachers. So I'm super glad to hear that you're excited about that. Good question about self-assessment as a freelance teacher. Can you answer it, please? Oh, I didn't see a question about self-assessment. I saw needs assessment. So I mentioned needs assessment. That's going to be included in online English teacher in terms of, I'll give you actual needs analysis templates that you can give the students. In terms of self-assessment, like assessing your own teaching, that's also going to be covered in module 9 as well, the new and improved module 9. It is actually currently included. I talk a bit about it. So that actually doesn't even, that's already there. I talk a lot about self-assessment in terms of, it's called personal action research that you can do on your teaching. It's a way, it's basically a professional development strategy where you can sort of continue to train yourself, even in addition to the external training that you're getting. You just need to be trained in how to do that, which I do give you that in Online English Teacher, how to assess yourself as a teacher. Andrea said, I see that in module 9, you cover, or I will cover, exam prep as part of teaching in different contexts. Is there more in-depth training within the English teacher course? It's going to be an overview, but you're correct that that will be an entirely different course or training, possibly one that will be offered in October. That's in the works, as the next course that I will offer is how to teach TOEFL and how to teach IELTS will be the first 2. If that goes well, then there may be others, how to teach FCE and things like that, depending on the demand. But TOEFL and IELTS have the biggest demand. So what I would recommend, Online English Teacher will be a very, very good prereq for that course, because you need to know not the basics, because it's more than just basics, but you need to know teaching methodology in general first. This was a question that somebody had in the last Q&A as to whether or not you could still use the general principles for online teaching or teaching in general. Like, can you still use general communicative principles such as pair checks, lesson frameworks, like these sort of communicative methodology strategies that you use in general teaching? Do those still apply in exam preparation? And the answer is absolutely yes. They should. You still need to teach in a communicative way, no matter what you're teaching, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's business English, whether it's exam prep. So you need to know all of that stuff first. You need to be very confident with those techniques before you can teach exam prep. That's sort of like the cherry on top, right? That's like a different layer of the cake. You still need the foundation underneath. So that analogy kind of got away from me, but you know what I'm saying. So I would recommend first making sure you are very, very solid in communicative methodology in general. Then if you want to specifically make your niche exam prep training, then sign up for the exam prep course. It's going to be less of an investment than Online English Teacher. Online English Teacher is kind of the big one, because I want everybody to have that first. And then eventually there will be these add-ons that you can choose that are coming in the future. So exam prep will be the first one because it's my favorite. And that'll be a more affordable, probably like a few $100 kind of price range that you can add on. Question, will these slides be shared with us? I don't share my slides, but I do offer the recording. So this session is being recorded. I forgot to record the last one, facepalm, but this session is being recorded. The recording will be available just like the webinars that I just did. The recordings will be available through Wednesday. So until about midnight, so 11:59 p.m. Wednesday, August 18th, Eastern time. So it's going to be a different time for you if you're not in Eastern US time. Recordings will be available online. So that's how you'll see these. And let me pop the link into the chat once again. This is the link for the recordings. I'll send this out in an email as well after this session. And then if you were interested in Online English Teacher that we've been talking about, let me pop the link for that into the chat as well. So it's just TEFLHorizons.com/OET.LTO for limited time offer. That's going to take you to not the normal Online English Teacher page, but the Online English Teacher page with the special discount. So with the $150 reduced price. And you'll see the timer at the top on the recordings page and the Online English Teacher page. So that will, since it's for a limited time only, that's going to give you a good reminder of when you can get that price and when you can watch the recording so that they don't miss it. Question, are there written assignments given to trainees within the Online English Teacher course? There are not written assignments in terms of essays. There are prompts, discussion prompts given to online English teacher, to the online English teachers. So they're written prompts in terms of like reflecting what you learned. There's also an option, even if you're not in the live practicum, to design a PowerPoint and post that to the community. So they're prompts for things you can post to the community. They're not written like written papers that you have to do, which is kind of nice. Selma asked, any books you recommend for curriculum design? Yes, Selma. I'm back at home now, so it's behind me. This is one that I really like. It is the one that someone helped me out with remembering last time. It's Syllabus Design by David Noonan. And Selma, I know you emailed me with this question too, so I'll send you a slightly longer list with a few more, but there's also going to be a list of extra resources in Online English Teacher in that module 9. So you'll be able to see them there too if you join Online English Teacher. Lorenzo has just dropped a couple of nice business recommendation books that I like Market Leader too. Lorenzo, he mentioned Market Leader and Business Result in the chat for business resources for teaching business English. I also like, I think it's just called Business. It's like 1-to-1 like that with the colon in the middle. That's a good one for obviously 1-to-1 business students. Okay, where are we in the chat here? So many good questions are coming up. Yes, so sort of a follow-up on getting paid to teach online. I usually work for an agency, but obviously the money isn't as good as being freelance. However, all course books are supplied to me and the students, right? As a freelancer, I assume you have to buy all your own course books for all levels. Would you require your students to buy them too? Yep, good question. So yeah, sort of couple of good questions here in terms of pros and cons for like working for an agency. Again, this is something we'll cover in depth in this module 10 of Online English Teacher, but short answers for now. So if you work for an agency, obviously pros, all the materials are provided, marketing is provided, so students are coming to them and then hopefully finding you. Big downside is obviously that agency is taking a huge cut of your pay. So if you eliminate that sort of middleman, you're getting all of the money, 100% of the money that you charge students is coming straight to you, which is a plus for the student as well, because typically the agency sort of charges a lot. So it's more expensive for the students and you as the teacher get less money. If it's just direct the student to you, you can charge the student less than they would be paying in an agency and you're still earning more. So that's a really nice benefit of teaching freelance. But as you've mentioned in your question, the downside is you don't have the resources just provided for you. I find it's probably best to start acquiring students first and then buy materials as needed for your students. What I don't want you to do is invest tons of money in like your own language learning library and then you never actually get a pre-intermediate level student. You just happen to get all advanced level students or, vice versa. And then you just bought this book that you never actually needed. So my recommendation would be, you don't need the books before you have the students, right? If you're well-trained, you'll have enough material through your training that you're not gonna like all of a sudden, get a pre-int student and have no idea what to do. You're gonna know that from your training. So that way you can just tailor the material that you buy. If you're gonna invest in it, it might as well be tailored to the students that you already have, right? So what I would say is just start getting students. You have, if you're waiting for a sign or you're waiting for permission, you have permission to start marketing to students as soon as you know how to do that. And then just get the materials after that. In terms of what I require my students to buy the books, I personally don't. I've had students who want to, and then of course I'll recommend the book that I want us to use and I'll have them buy it if they want their own book. I personally, since I do all of my teaching on PowerPoint, the students don't actually need the book at all. I just put all of the material into my PowerPoint slides the way I will when I plan my lesson. Especially if it's just a one-on-one student, they can take screenshots or I can send them my PowerPoint. After the lesson, I will send them my whole teaching PowerPoint and they have it. So that's a nice benefit for the students too, that they know they don't have to buy a book. You're just going to provide them all of the material as part of the course fee that they pay you. Question, what about students listening 3 times? Sure. Again, that's something we've already talked about listed comprehension a bit, so I won't go super in depth. But if you are in the online English teacher course, you already know there's no magic number of how many times students need to listen. It's all about following the listening lesson framework and following that sort of listening feedback cycle that we talk about in depth in online English teacher. And yeah, good follow-up. Students are generally frustrated because they can't understand every single word. In online English teacher, I teach you exactly how to deal with that. They don't have to be frustrated. It's natural for students to have some frustration about their level of comprehension. It's your job as a teacher to plan a lesson that motivates them to listen and shows them what they can understand rather than what points out what they can't understand. So if you're well-trained, you know exactly how to deal with that. And it involves some very specific and practical strategies for setting a task up front, setting manageable tasks, and how you approach all of that. Potentially doing some pre-teaching. All of that stuff is covered. Let's see, tips for a first timer in teaching online. Oh man, that's general. Tips in general, get trained. I mean, I'm sorry, I know that probably sounds sales pitchy, but it's so true. Like, you just can't teach well without good training. So my first most basic tip is join Online English Teacher if you haven't already. I mean, it's my honest tip. Like, I'm not just saying that to sell the course. I'm saying that because it will give you everything you need. And then it doesn't matter if you're a first timer in teaching in general or first timer in teaching online, that will give you all of that. If you're already in Online English Teacher, or additional tips, if you're asking me to kind of curate like the main ones that are covered in that course, use a communicative method still, which is something you should do anyway if you're teaching in person, but something I see is when teachers transition to online, sometimes that kind of goes out the window. So you still need to teach with a communicative methodology. So that means breakout rooms, that means pair and group work, that means lots of student talk time. That's number one. Specific ways to do that: use the task cycle, which means setting clear tasks, letting students work alone, letting students work in pairs, and then doing feedback. So that should be consistent throughout all of your online lessons. That's another one. And then the third one would be master your tech. Get really comfortable with the technology that you're going to use. So think about, how are you going to share and present materials? Are you going to use PowerPoint, which is what I do? You don't have to, you could use Google Slides or something else, but find something that works where you can still present really beautiful visuals. There's in-depth training on using PowerPoint in Online English Teacher. And then get really comfortable, get practice using things like PowerPoint, doing things like sharing your screen, using things like Google Docs, setting up breakout rooms, all of that stuff. You're going to have to practice. So if you're a brand new online teacher, I would recommend the live practicum version of Online English Teacher specifically, so you get that hands-on practice. You want to make all your mistakes with students who are learning for free, right? Which the online students that you practice on in Online English Teacher in the live practicum, they're taking free lessons because they know that their teachers are in a training course. So make all your mistakes with me helping you and with the students who aren't paying. So that way, when you do charge for lessons, you're not making those mistakes anymore. That's my other big tip, is you don't want to be messing this stuff up. Like, it takes practice. You're going to mess up. That's totally normal. I messed up the first time I taught online, right? Like, it's just going to happen. So get that out of the way in your training, so that once you actually start charging students, you don't have students saying, wow, that was a waste of money. Like, that teacher didn't know what they were doing, right? When it's the free students in Online English Teacher, they know exactly what they signed up for, and they're so kind and so patient. Joyce or Carl, if you're still here, you can probably speak to the students and how lovely and patient they are in the Online English Teacher course, in terms of how you felt, kind of struggling through things, and them being just super patient with all of us. How many sessions do I need to teach my students for them to upgrade from a level to another, or an approximate way to know they upgraded? Like, what do I do is what you're asking. Yeah, that's tough because every student is different and every course is different. And it honestly almost solely depends on sort of the motivation level of the student and how they're doing in the lessons that you're already giving them. So I don't know if I have a good answer for this. I'm sorry. I want to give you one. And I honestly feel like whatever I say is not going to be a great answer. I think kind of vague answer, the more training you have, the more comfortable you're going to be just kind of knowing when they're ready. Obviously, if the student is only working with you the whole time, like they're moving from, working on one book, like if they're a private student with you and it's just moving from like one book to the next, you're just going to know kind of once they're comfortable with all that material, you can just start giving them new material. If you're asking, like if you're a language teacher with an organization, then the language school should have systems in place. Yeah, I don't have a fantastic answer for that. Jacqueline, you did ask me something about English file that I missed. Feel free to ask it again if I didn't get there. But would you recommend investing in an up-to-date series of English file plus all the teachers' books? That's getting expensive. Yeah, totally. I like English file. You might like other things, and some recommendations have already come up in the chat, which are great too. I'm not saying English file is the only one. It's just for whatever reason, the one that I like. So yeah, I mean, again, I would just say invest in like if you get a student who's intermediate level, then I would say, yeah, invest in that level of English file. Honestly, the teacher's books are not necessary if you're well trained. I would say if you take online English teacher, you don't need the teacher's books, because the teacher's books are, do I have a hard copy of a teacher's book? I don't. The teacher's books are almost completely, what they are the answer keys for the students' books, which I mean, that's helpful. But if you know what you're doing, you should know the answers, or you know that I've trained you to adapt the activities so that the answers are what you already know. It's largely the answer keys, and it's largely like a how to teach this lesson. The problem with that is the book doesn't know, I say this all the time, the book doesn't know how long your lesson is. The book doesn't know who your students are. The book doesn't know how many lessons you're teaching and how often you're teaching every week. So like even with the student course book, something that teachers find challenging is like they'll open a page here, and like you're not going to be able to see this up close, but like if I open this page, it starts, this particular page that I randomly open to, it starts with a vocabulary exercise. There's a whole in-depth pronunciation exercise. There's a speaking exercise here. On this page, there's a grammar exercise on gerunds and infinitives. There's a whole other speaking exercise here, which is also kind of reading and fill in the blank. And then there's a whole extra speaking exercise here. There's a grammar bank over here. On the next page, we've got reading, we've got listening, we've got speaking, we've got vocabulary, all on the same page. So the course book is just trying to give you everything you need to not run out of material and be able to teach whatever you need to teach in that given moment. They're not really, if you don't know what you're doing, then they're not ready-made lessons, because you'll end up teaching 6 different things or trying to teach 6 different things in an hour, which means at the end of the day, you've really taught nothing. So you need to follow what you'll learn in a good training course, where it's going to show you, like online English teacher. That's why I organized the modules the way I did, because each module focuses on teaching one particular type of lesson. So that means I could open to that page and say, oh, I'm going to pull out just the vocab stuff and teach one really good vocab lesson from this particular page. You'll learn exactly how to do that. The teacher's book is just going to walk you through how to teach every single thing on the page, but it's not going to tell you how to teach necessarily one effective, isolated vocab lesson. Does that make sense? So I actually don't think it's that useful. Like the advice that it gives, I explicitly tell my trainees to ignore, because it's going to lead you astray from what you actually need to do. The only benefit that I like of the teacher's book is it has an extra activity bank, the very last part of the book. For most series, not all coursebook series, English file, yes. The last little chunk of the teacher's book is like an extra activity bank of communicative activities, extra fill in the blank activities. But if you've enrolled an online English teacher, you don't need that either, because I give you extra practice activities. So that's the only reason it's helpful to have. And you can find those types of activities online anyway, additionally. So I would say ignore the teacher's books. You would pretty much just need the student book for that particular series, if that helps. Okay, tons of good ideas are coming up in the chat. Hey, Marta, better late than never. Welcome. You're so welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for that comment. Oh, thanks, Joyce. Joyce said, oh yes, I totally recommend the practicum. Carl says students were so forgiving. Joyce says the students were great. Oh, thank you, Carl. Said I loved Online English Teacher. You two are fantastic. I loved watching all of your lessons, and I kind of hope you sign on for the practicum again, so I can watch you teach again. Because you two were phenomenal teachers. Andreas says, is there such a thing as becoming online certified, meaning you have been trained towards utilizing online teaching methods? That's Online English Teacher. Yes, there is. That's what I made specifically for that reason, because there really wasn't before. It was just kind of generally trained. And that's not what everybody's doing these days. So that is literally why I created Online English Teacher, so that you could be online specifically online teaching certified. Yeah, and I think in other words, the pandemic has changed what employers or students are wanting. Fantastic question, because this also leads me to a question that came up that somebody asked before this session, and that came up in the last Q&A that I think was super important. A question came up about courses and certificates being accredited and kind of what that means, and which courses and certifications are recognized and which ones aren't. And somebody made a really good point. They asked the question, is it true that there's not really one kind of overarching or official body that accredits TEFL courses? And the answer is that's true. Yeah, there is not. So the thing with our industry is there really is not one authority on what makes a course, a training course, a TEFL course official and what doesn't. As many of you know, if you've done any research on different TEFL courses, there are so many out there. And a common misconception is that you have two options. You can get a CELTA or you can get a TEFL. Let me debunk that now. CELTA is a thing. Obviously, that's a real course. CELTA is probably the only course that is internationally recognized and accepted, aside from maybe the CERT Trinity TESOL, which is viewed as an equivalent. The reason for that is not that any sort of teaching gods or international body made it so, that nobody said that. It's like the stock market, right? It's just kind of the value depends on what people recognize and what people know. So CELTA just got big enough and is good enough, to be fair. I'm not saying it's not. It's a quality course enough and it got big enough that everybody knows what it is. That's the only reason why it has this standard, is because of the value that we in the industry have placed on it. That matters. I'm not saying that doesn't matter. So CELTA is kind of the only one at that level because everybody knows it. In terms of other courses, TEFL isn't one course. TEFL is just the name of our industry, teaching English as a foreign language. TEFL and TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. That's just the name of our industry. So CELTA is a TEFL. CELTA is a TESOL certificate. They're not mutually exclusive. CELTA just happens to be the most recognized TEFL certificate. But what that means, there are so many TEFL certificates out there. Some of them are accredited by various bodies, but accredited doesn't mean that there's one authority accrediting it. There are many different accrediting bodies. And the process for accreditation is basically you apply and you pay money, and then you're accredited. So any TEFL certification could do that, right? The accreditation might certify how many hours the course is, more or less. And that, it does some kind of a check that this isn't just a scam, like it is a real person that's offering this real course, that you're going to get something for your money. But I've had language schools email me and say, how do I know whether this TEFL certificate is official or not? There is no official. So what it comes down to when choosing one is that you need to pick one that makes sense for you. So if you want to teach online, pick one that's going to give you online training. If you want to teach in person, pick one that's going to, give you in-person training if that's what you feel that you need. So what is going to happen is if you have any TEFL certificate, the employer is going to need you to somehow back that up, right? We're at a point in our industry now where the certificate itself doesn't matter so much as what you learned to do in that course. And it's very, very obvious to employers and to students as soon as they talk to you, as soon as they interview you, as soon as they see you teach a demo lesson, regardless of what your certificate says, whether you know what you're doing or not. For example, the very first question that I was asked in my very first English teaching job interview was, how would you start a lesson? So if you have had good training, if you've taken online English teacher, or you've taken a CELTA course, you know the right answer to this question, don't you? Go ahead and type it into the chat. If you haven't had very good training, you might not be sure how to answer this question. And so even that very small question, it's going to become obvious to employers. And so same kind of thing with online. If you're trying to get a job teaching online, if you're getting questions in the interview, how are you going to do this online? How do you do that online? Have you ever had this issue with classroom management online? How did you handle it? Right? Like that's going to become obvious to employers right away how trained you are. So yes, CELTA is kind of like the brand name of a TEFL certificate. Nancy, hey Nancy, I didn't know you were here. Will you be offering additional observed teaching practice for teachers who've completed online English teacher? Yes. And you're going to get an email from me about that probably today. If not today, then definitely tomorrow. You're not the first of my online English teacher live practicum people who have asked about this. So yep, it's happening. You'll just basically need to pay the difference between the two, but you have the option to sign on for round 2 of the practicum if you want. For those of you who are wondering how that works, in the first round, you get quite a bit of advice from me in terms of outlining your lesson. And if you are in the course already, you know what I'm talking about. But I basically send you an outline of like, here's a suggested advice for how to prepare this lesson on this material that I've sent you. Round 2 is going to give you more training and practice in, we're going to take the training wheels off a little bit more. Unless you want them, you can request them if you want. But what I feel that most of you want and need, and what I'm going to offer to you is you'll do the same thing again. So you'll teach one of each of the different lesson types. So 8 more lessons. I'll still give you the material, like you're going to teach, for your second lesson, a reading lesson on this article, but without the step-by-step advice. So now you put into practice what you've learned about teaching a reading lesson, and you figure it out on your own in terms of the stages. We're still going to do guided lesson planning, but that means it's going to be kind of next level guided lesson planning, where instead of just sort of telling you what to do to that same extent, you're going to tell me what you're going to do, and then I'll give you guidance from there. So it's going to focus a lot more on like the planning decisions that you're making, what activities you're choosing, what activities you're creating, less than just sort of the hand holding. Does that make sense? Yeah, Selma, great follow-up to what I just said about getting training. So it's not so much about the certificate itself and where it comes from. It's about, knowing the framework of each type of lesson, how to plan lessons. Like it's so obvious so quickly to the students and to employers if you know that stuff or you don't. So just make sure whatever training course you're signing up for, that you're getting that you feel comfortable with who is training you and what information you're going to get, so that you can justify your certificate to your employer. And that's why so many teachers will think that they want to save money and spend less on a cheaper certificate, and then they end up having to come back and invest in a more expensive program like CELTA or online English teacher, because they didn't get the training that they actually need. And students are figuring that out and employers are figuring that out. Okay. Yeah, Lorenzo says, it's important to check if the certificate has more than 120 contact hours. Yes, I would say that's definitely true. However, that used to be the case. Like that used to be the sort of indication. I'm seeing certificates out there that are saying 120 hours, but they aren't necessarily. And I'm seeing certificates that I know don't have that much contact that are saying 120 contact hours, because it takes you 120 hours to like work through the material. So I would say make sure there are definitely video lessons involved. definitely you watching teachers teach real lessons, either in the classroom or online, specifically online if you know that you want to teach online. And make sure, I would say, Lorenzo, maybe my sort of new rule for that is whether there's a practicum option. If the course offers no type of practicum as an option, for me, that's the thing that's not a good sign. Like CELTA obviously includes the teaching practice. Online English Teacher includes the optional teaching practice. Because I think that's where the money, like the money is, in terms of like, you're actually really learning something. You don't necessarily have to do the practicum to get what you need, to get your qualification and to get the information that you need, especially if you already have teaching practice. Like if you already have teaching experience, sorry, maybe you don't need the practicum, and you're just, for example, signing up for Online English Teacher to get sort of all of the online strategies and materials. But yeah, if they don't offer any type of practicum, then it's not a great sign. I wonder if I can add these webinars to my CV's professional development section. Sure, why not? And I do offer attendance certificates. You can download them on the recordings page. Let's see, I know I'm missing stuff. If I've missed your question, feel free to type it in again. Antonetta says, I feel a great relief for not using the teacher's book that much now. I never use the teacher's book, except sometimes for those extra activities. But by now I know them, so they're just kind of there. Good. I like it, Sarah. Teachers should never be book slaves. Yes, as a teacher, as a trained teacher, you should never, ever be tied to the book. Completely agree. I think this is the big mistake that new teachers make, is they just follow the book activity by activity. This goes back to Lorenzo's question. You have to ask yourself, why are you doing this? So for each activity, it's not enough to just do it. You need to know why you are doing that. Why are you giving the students this activity? So the teachers who are just going activity by activity right down the page in the book, when I've observed lessons like this, I can tell that they have no idea why they're doing that activity. The reason they're doing that activity is because it's the next activity in the book, but they have no idea what that's adding to the lesson, why they're doing that for their students. That's not good. So what I say is, don't think of the book as a ready-made lesson. You need to think of your course book, whatever course book you're using, as kind of this wealth of raw material from which you sculpt your perfect lesson. It's raw material. It's not ready-made finished material. So you can pick and choose. You take what you need from the book and you sculpt that into your perfect lesson. You form that into your lesson. And that's what training teaches you how to do. And that's what the students are paying for, to be quite honest. If I am a student and my teacher just takes me activity by activity through the book, I feel that that's an incredible waste of my time and money, because I could do that at home by myself. I could buy the book for $20. Why am I paying $40 a lesson for somebody to show me something I could do at home by myself, right? So our job as teachers is to elevate what's in the book, to create lessons from the book. Yeah. Okay, yep, I'm seeing questions that I missed. Yeah, so Andrea, to just come back very quickly to summarize the end of your question, has the pandemic changed what employers or students are wanting? My take is yes. It has changed in that people want teachers with online teaching, training, and experience. So and it also depends on what you want. If you want to teach online, make sure you get trained to teach online. When teaching a group course, you use a course book along with your PowerPoints, right? It depends on what I'm teaching. I often use a course book. I often will take some material from English File or from another course book and put it into my PowerPoints. You'll see this very clearly, Marta, an Online English Teacher, in the lessons on how to use PowerPoint. I show you exactly how I take something from a book and then build it into a PowerPoint presentation. And then sometimes I just use completely authentic materials that I put into my PowerPoints. But I put everything into PowerPoint. So I don't like share the course book page and then share my PowerPoint and then share something else. I put everything into my PowerPoint, so it's all in one place. And then that goes through the whole lesson, even my listening activities, videos, everything, no matter where it comes from. Is there a difference between TEFL certificate and diploma? I've seen both of them online. Some TEFL certificates call themselves diplomas. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. You could get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in TESOL, right? In teaching EFL. That's, I guess, a university diploma, university degree. But some TEFL will say like, this is the 120-hour TEFL diploma from whatever school. So in that case, no, that's a TEFL. That's just has diploma in the name. So again, just check that it is giving you the kind of training that you want. Excuse me. Okay. So many good questions. This is fun. Oh, here we go. Joyce, I missed this somehow. Thanks for thank you for asking again. So my earlier question was a follow-up on getting feedback from students, either through formal survey by an organization or directly when you're a freelancer. Okay. Yes, the language school that I worked for, they at the end of the class, they would give the students like a feedback form to fill out about my teaching and about my lessons. So many schools do that. Obviously, the school will have its own method for doing that. But yes, most organizations will have the students fill out feedback about you either at the end of the lesson, if it's kind of a one-off, like some of the specifically online organizations will do that. Other times it's like at the end of the course, they'll send the students what am I trying to say, survey or form that the students will fill out feedback about the whole course that they took with you. That often happens. You can also create that yourself. That isn't a template that I had thought to include in Online English Teacher, but I certainly could. Let me make a note. Either way, I'm going to show you some ways of like making forms so you could create your own or like tweak it if you wanted to as a freelancer, if you wanted to send your students a survey at the end of your class about student feedback. Sorry, I missed that before. So thank you for clarifying that that's what you were asking. Do you issue invoices? I'm not sure what you're asking, Marta. Are you asking like if you enroll in Online English Teacher, do you get a receipt or an invoice? If that's not what you're asking, then maybe rephrase your question. Do students usually prepay an entire course, say 4 weeks at a time, prepay a number of lessons? That's totally up to you as a freelance teacher. The best there's so many, I can't say the best thing. There are so many good things about freelance online teaching, but a perk of freelance online teaching is you make the rules. So what's your policy? Set your policy. I will say that prepaying does help in terms of cutting down on cancellations. Sarah says Prezi and Adobe Spark make great presentations. Yeah. So the same, I teach with PowerPoint, but what you learn about creating teaching material on PowerPoint and Online English Teacher, it's the exact same whether you do it on Prezi or Adobe Spark. Like you'll still learn those. I'm not going to teach you exactly those tools, but it's the same strategies. So you'll still get a lot out of that. Google Slides as well. I do have a tech tutorial on Google Slides specifically. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Andrea. It was a guess, but I was pretty sure. Okay, Marta, yes, you were asking about receipt. Yes, you do. Let me show you very quickly for those of you who are new or aren't sure. So we can just do quickly, I can show you kind of what the enrollment process looks like. So if you enroll in Online English Teacher, that link that I sent you, that teflhorizons.com/OET-LTO, I'll share the link again. It's right up here at the top on my webpage. If you go to that page, this is what you're going to find. It's going to take you here. So you'll see the timer at the top. That's going to show you how much time you have left to get the discount. So right now you have about 3 days and 8 hours to get the $150 off of enrollment. That's also how long the recordings will stay online for. So when this timer hits 0, the recordings will no longer be available. So make sure you watch those as well. And then when you want to enroll, you'll come here, choose the option that you want. You can see the discounted price is already displayed. So decide whether you want the live practicum or the self-study, and then decide whether you want to pay in full or do the payment plan. So once you click on one, let's say I want to do the practicum and I want to pay in full, it's going to take me to the checkout page. You'll put in your payment information, and then this will light up once your payment information is in, your card info and billing address. Buy now. It's going to direct you through a couple of things. It will direct you to very quickly, it's going to walk you right through it. It's super easy. Set up a login information. It will also send you an email receipt. So you'll have the email receipt if you need to invoice for an employer or something like that. And then as soon as you do that, you're going to get access to this. So once you log in, at any time, you can go to teflhorizons.teachable.com/courses, and I'll send you that link in the confirmation email that you get from me so you can bookmark it. And this is exactly what it looks like as an enrolled teacher when you sign on. So don't forget, Be Your Own Grammar Guru. The full course is included when you sign up for Online English Teacher. So this will pop up for you also. So it has like its own room. So you can go into the Be Your Own Grammar Guru course from this page. You can go into Online English Teacher right here. And then if you sign up for the practicum, it's not ready for the September people yet. This is for the June, July people. This is for the session 1 people. They see these things. There will be an extra room that pops up for you in September once I set it up once I know who all my live practicum teachers are. After enrollment closes, you'll have an additional room that looks like this. So for the Online English Teacher course, you'll just click on that and everything is right there for you. So you can start working through everything as soon as you want. You can see here's all the tutorials on using PowerPoint, using Google Jamboard. So this is kind of for your visuals. And then module 1 starts here. You can start watching the videos. Like if I click on a video, it'll pull that up. I can click here and watch it. I can maximize and watch, and then the navigation still stays on the left-hand side, so I can skip around, watch whatever I want there. So super easy. And the live practicum room looks almost exactly the same. It just has special stuff only for the live practicum teachers. So that's going to have a few extra treats, like a lesson plan template, the teaching practice reflection journal, the syllabus for your particular course, but will give you the weeks when you're teaching different types of lessons and kind of where you should be in the online course materials so that you keep up, since that is time sensitive. Some additional advice. We'll do a welcome meeting that's live, so the recording of that will live here. And then the different teachers, they have their lessons recorded and they live here as well. So at any time you can go back and do asynchronous observation of your peers, which is really nice. So that's just a little peek at the back end of what that looks like. But long answer to your question, yes, you will get a receipt from Teachable, from that course platform. If you need a more specific invoice for some reason than the one that Teachable gives you, I think that one should be fine. I'm happy to issue you one from TEFL Horizons specifically. That's not a problem. Oh, Selma. Yes, I'm so glad you brought up Canva. I'm going to include a tutorial on Canva in the new module because I'm obsessed with Canva. I use Canva for a lot of my graphics. So even if you want to make like a flyer to advertise your teaching, Instagram post to advertise your teaching, Instagram stories, I am in love with Canva. I'm going to create, that's already in the works. There will be a tech tutorial specifically on Canva for presentations and for a bunch of other stuff. Question, if you sign up for the course, is it lifelong access to the resources or does it expire at any point? It is lifelong access. Yep. At some point in the future, if Online English Teacher gets crazy big, it might go to like a yearly membership. But if you get in when it's online, if I tell you it's lifetime access, which I'm doing now, I'm never going to take it away. So it would just mean that your grandfather, like if at any time in the future, Online English Teacher ends up going to more like a yearly subscription membership thing, and this is just me planning ahead. If you come in when it's lifetime access, you will be grandfathered in still. You won't lose your access. It just means that incoming people at that point will be signing up for something different. Yeah, but it is, you signing up now will be lifetime access forever. Yeah, you're welcome. So for example, like the teachers who have done the live practicum, there's one live practicum that we did that was January, February. There's another one that we just finished that we did that was June, July. All of those teachers, they've finished their teaching. That means that they now have the option to number one, if they want to, they can sign on for round 2 of the live practicum, or they're still just members of Online English Teacher. They have access to all the self-study stuff forever. So if they want to go back and review any of the modules, if they want to keep participating in the Online English Teacher community, asking questions, interacting with each other, interacting with the new incomers, that stays forever. And then same with the self-study people. At any time, if they feel like joining the practicum, they can. They just pay the difference between the two versions. So it honestly is, it's kind of almost more like a membership, like a lifetime membership club in some ways than a course, because you just get all the material forever. And that also means that anything I upgrade, like the teachers who are currently in the course are just getting that upgrade automatically for the new modules 9 and 10 without having to do anything or purchase anything additional. Okay, I think, oh, nope, there are some new questions. When is this course starting? The full one? Yep, great question. Let me pull up the visual for you if you want to take a screenshot. So the next live practicum is beginning September 6th. So again, how it works, since it's lifetime access, what you should do is enroll now for the live practicum. Don't wait until September because it's going to be more expensive. The discount won't be happening anymore. Here we go. Let me make sure I'm showing you the slide I want to show you. So the live practicum, access to the course begins the second you enroll, like I just showed you. So sign up for that, like enroll in the course now and enroll in the live practicum version if you want to do the upcoming one. You'll get instant access to all the self-study material. So between now and September, you can start prepping, working through it. And then the actual practicum, you will start teaching the second week of September. So it starts the week of September 6th, and you'll work with me one-on-one to set your regular weekly teaching time. So you'll agree on what time you want to teach every week. And then, yeah, for 8 weeks, you'll be doing 1 lesson per week. So the practicum itself begins September 6th that week. But the self-study starts as soon as you enroll, whenever you want to start. So definitely enroll now if you want the practicum in September. A big question that's come up a lot is people who want to do the practicum, but they know that September, October isn't a great time. And they ask, can I enroll now and do it next year in January? Those dates here will be the following session of the live practicum. Again, the answer is yes. So enroll now. If you know for sure that you want to do the practicum, enroll in the live practicum option, do the $847 version. And then just tell me, I'm going to reach out to you via email anyway. Just tell me in that email, yes, I want to do the practicum. That's why I signed up for it, but I want to do it in January. And that means that you get first dibs on your January spot, because I only open 8 spots for the practicum. 2 of them now are already taken. So there's 6 spots left for September. There's going to be 8 spots in January. So that means that you'll reserve one of those 8 spots already. Nobody else can take it. If you think you want to do the practicum, but you're not totally sure, then sign up for just the self-study and you can add on the practicum later when you decide you want to do it. Okay, question. I want to niche down and teach legal English, and I want to create a curriculum for group lessons. Awesome. What do you think about creating a curriculum that responds to the general needs of lawyers and then adjust it later on based on my students' preferences? I think that's great. That sounds like a great idea. Oh, I did miss a question. Let me go back up and check that. Oh, I'd like to enroll, but I'll do module 3 of Delta 2. Would it be too much? For module 3 of Delta, I don't think so. For module 2 of Delta, probably. But I would say if you're doing module 3, that should be okay. You don't have to answer this right now since we're like in this webinar together, but feel free to email me if you have more specific questions. Because I know for module 3, it also depends on how much time you're giving yourself. Like I'm guessing are you submitting the paper in, it's June and January, right? So you'd probably be submitting in January. I would say you'll be fine. Yeah, it kind of depends on how you're doing the module 3, but yeah, you'll be fine. Because Online English Teacher, even if you do the live practicum, you're going to be done at the end of October. And then the self-study is super flexible. If you're doing module 2 of Delta and the live practicum, I would say no, that's too much. Yes. Okay. I did miss a question. Let me go back to it. All right. Give me just a second to read because it's kind of a longer one. I want to make sure I summarize it. Okay. So there's a question about language, and this has come up in a few other questions in other ways as well. So basically, what to do, it's a classroom management issue, what to do if you have a student who is acting in a way that's inappropriate. For example, maybe swearing, using inappropriate language, maybe saying inappropriate cultural things. How do you handle it? And the way this person phrased it, at a minimum, it's an unprofessional way to conduct oneself. I completely agree. In my personal life, I swear quite freely when I feel like it. I personally have nothing against that. I make it a point to try not to do that in a professional setting because not everybody is comfortable with that. And so I agree with the point that this person just made that, it's in a professional setting, we should conduct ourselves as professionally as possible so that everybody's comfortable, especially when we're doing something like teaching English, when it's very common to have people from many cultures in the same space and different things are more or less comfortable maybe to people in different cultures. So I think we want to try to keep it sort of as, we want to err on the side of maybe being a little too safe for everybody rather than making somebody feel uncomfortable. So I would say if that's happening, it's very much okay to make a group announcement. You don't have to single anybody out, but you can make an announcement to the class, about sort of your expectations and what's appropriate and what's not. And you can address it from a cultural point of view as well. Like, you don't have to make it a personal attack. What I can say is, I understand that these words are common in English, that these words come up in English. You may even want to learn about these words in English. That's understandable. But in a professional setting, to make it like a formality issue in a professional, more formal setting, like an English class, I'm the teacher here, and in my culture, in my whatever, it's not appropriate to use these words. So if you would like to be in this class, these are the words that we need to use, or these are the words that we're not going to use. So I think that's okay. If it persists, then I would have a meeting, ask that student to have a meeting one-on-one, or maybe send that student an email and just say, look, this is my policy. You can't use this language, or you can't do these things or say these things. And then if it persists, I would ask the student to leave the class. Thankfully, that's not something that has happened with our students on the online English teacher course. At least nothing that I have seen or that anyone has brought to my attention. But if it did happen, I would have no problem asking the student to leave if that wasn't something that the teacher felt comfortable with doing. Okay, good. I'm glad. It sounds like people are saying that was a good answer. Okay, I think we're slowing down. It's been a couple hours. I'm shocked. I thought it had been about 45 minutes. I guess time flies when you're having fun. Hey, Paulo, nice to see you. I didn't know you were here. Great. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? I shudder to think of my teacher talk. These webinars are always a bit weird because it's like the opposite of what we normally do in class, right? Just all me talking. Okay. Yep. I think we're winding down. Perfect. Yes. Feel free to email me info@tufflehorizons.com. That goes directly to me. So do feel free. Awesome. Okay. Yep. Quite a few. So I'm going to, people who want round 2 of the practicum who are already an online English teacher, that is coming because I want to make sure you get spots also if you want spots, and I'll probably open some extra spots just for you, for my already online English teachers. But if you, I guess my sort of parting advice, since we had so many questions about online English teacher and the practicum, if you know that you want that September practicum, even though you have 3 days counting down to get your discount, don't wait until the last minute, because if the spots fill up, then I don't want you to miss out. You can still obviously do the self-study, but if you really want to do the September practicum, I don't want you to miss it. So there's 6 spots left for that. Enroll sooner rather than later. So you can snag those because they start to go fast once things get moving. And self-study, you have the 3 days. 3 days and how many hours do we have left? 7 or 8 hours to get in on the discounted rate. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. This was a blast. Honestly, I couldn't have thought of a better way to spend a few hours on a Sunday afternoon. It was really, really lovely to talk with all of you. And I hope I see you, an online English teacher. Let's keep the party going. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. And I hope to see and connect with all of you very soon. Bye, everybody. Aw, thanks. Antonetta, you're the best. You are too. I feel like I pronounced your name wrong. I'm sorry. You are all the best. Really, really, really. This gives me so much just energy and joy. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.